Hello, Dr. Price and fellow Liberty students. I want to talk about my research. I was looking at President Ulysses S. Grant and his first Commissioner of Indian Affairs, Eli Parker, and how Grant and Parker wanted to manage the various reservations and the roughly 300,000 Native Americans that were living in the western section of the United States. And I looked a little bit of the background of Grant and Parker and the Native Americans themselves. And Grant showed a sensitivity uh, to Native Americans as a young man at West Point, also as a lieutenant in Mexico. You can see in some of his letters that he wrote to his wife Julia that he had compassion. And when he became General Grant, he really began to formulate ideas on how to bring Native Americans into mainstream USA. And he worked with General David Pope and, of course, General Eli Parker, who Grant was friends with. They met in Galena, Illinois before the war. Parker was a full-blooded Native American, and he was very talented. So he was an excellent choice, not just being a friend of Grant, serving on Grant's staff. Parker joined Grant in Vicksburg. He had all the qualifications. He was trained in law. He was a capable administrator. He was an engineer. He was familiar with the military, had a lot of good connections in the military. And he agreed with Grant that it would be a good idea to put military officers in charge of some of these larger reservations and serve as the boss there. Indian agents were often very corrupt, and Grant believed that transferring the Indian Affairs Office back into the War Department and having the military take an active role would be the right path to take. Parker was in agreement with this, and it looks like they were on the cusp of getting it done. They had some momentum going that way, and then there were some altercations between the Army and Native Americans, and then Congress circumvented any opportunities that Grant would have had to place the Indian Affairs back in the War Department. So ultimately, Grant's peace policy was filled with disappointment, and it didn't really work as well as Grant would have liked it to work. There was some success. Many of the Native Americans came over to the reservations. They believed that Grant was, a good man, and they believed they had some hope. Ultimately, some Native American nations chose not to go to the reservations, and there were some confrontations. My research suggests that it was a very difficult job. You had so many Americans coming into the Great Plains, into the West, and they were not able to stop them. It was just too much for the Army to handle, too much agitation between the Native Americans and the migrants coming in. And even though Grant worked really hard, he was forthright with the Native American chiefs. He's like, look, you got to go to reservations. There's so many coming, and they come every year in greater numbers than, you have total, your whole people. So it was just an overwhelming force. Congress was looking to hold political power. So they were undermining Grant's efforts. Then this William Welsh really caused a lot of trouble. He ultimately ends up forcing some ridiculous issues with Parker. I believe it's disheartened Parker, and Parker will ultimately resign as Grant's superintendent of Indian Affairs. And this was a big loss. Grant is going to be able to replace him with a man named Walker, who is very capable too. But that's beyond the the purview of these studies that I've been looking at. I just stop at Parker's tenure as the boss of Indian Affairs. So ultimately, too big a task. Everyone wasn't locked in, and it was just too much to overcome.